guys, Joe here. The guy who said owning a nice chair doesn't mean you owe money to everyone who's ever built a chair. And I'm here to talk about UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Xiaonan. I want to go ahead and say apologies if I've been pronouncing this name wrong. As we know, I'm terrible at this. I am a Southern American after all. But it was at the Apex, or perhaps what will soon be known as potentially the Terrarium. But enough jokes about Mark Zuckerberg, for the time being at least, and let's get to the fights. In our main event, we had Mackenzie Dern versus Yan Xiaonan. I just want to say, I was really high on Mackenzie Dern for a while. I thought when she was going to just submit and do what Damian Maia was going to do, or at least like what a lot of us thought he was going to do. And she's done a really good job of doing that, but every time she fights someone who's in like the top 5, just gets beat. You know, she's not quite gatekeepering at this point. She's more like getting beat by that upper echelon, it feels like. But I'm a big fan of hers, or I was at least a big fan of hers. I followed her career back in just grappling. I remember her tapping everybody out before her accents, just magically shifted. And I was a big fan of hers when I was training jiu-jitsu at the time. I was like, oh, here's an attractive woman who's just wrecking. Like, who cares if she's attractive? She's incredibly dominant in her sport, and it was just awesome to watch. So, of course, I was a fan of hers. But man, she got kind of whooped on a little bit here, I felt like. And Xiaonan in her last fight, I didn't give her enough credit. In her last fight, she had a really close fight with the real number 1 contender. If I remember correctly, I remember right, that fight's really close. The second round is the big contentious round, if I remember correctly, was against Marina Rodriguez, who's the real number 1 contender. I don't care about what they're doing, like in the title picture. It seems like they want to do Weili Zhang, which all power to them, but Marina Rodriguez deserves that. So I probably should have expected better from Yan Xiaonan, but she kind of surprised me here. She was able to win the fight on the feet, which is what we all kind of thought, but she was landing good shots at times, and they had some of them had some real good pep, real good pep in that step, I guess. But she was also defending the grappling threats really well. She was stuffing takedowns. Dern would kind of like lay and pray and kind of stall her against the fence, and she would kind of defend really well. And then when they did hit the ground, because we all know eventually it's probably going to, she was defending submission threats well. She was getting out of any real danger. There was a couple times where it was close, but like for the most part, she did amazing on the ground against Dern. I was very, very impressed. And honestly, it kind of was a close fight in the sense of in terms of how many rounds did each fighter win. And Dern won 2 rounds. I think that's kind of fair to say. I think it was the second, definitely the 5th. And then Yan Xiaonan just won the rest of them. But that 5th round was really dominant for Dern. She nearly got an armbar. She was kind of dominating that round. So I see a lot of people on Twitter say it was a 10-8. I saw a lot of people say, no, it's a 10-9. So, Yan Xiaonan. But for me personally, I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer there. I just don't. I'm a little weird when how I want to score things. I think scoring things should be obviously we all want like a change to the rules, but I wish they did this where it's like it's a close round and I lean towards this fighter though. That's a 10-9 round. It's a very clear, but not incredibly they were never gonna like finish the fight, but it was a very clear round for this fighter. That's a 10-8 for them. Oh, this was a absolute slaughtering. I'm surprised the ref didn't stop it and they're walking back to their corner. That's a 10-7, a 10-6, and etc. I feel like we should do that. I think that would help clear up a lot of judging calls because I think the amount of rounds equal to the amount of dominant time and how dominant you are in the times when you're winning. I think that is an interesting dynamic to judging. I would like to see that in the future. I think a lot of fights, I would love to go back and review fights and rejudge them based on my potentially terrible judging idea. But, that's what I'm just saying. But, Yan Xiaonan, she does win the fight by majority decision. One judge gave it a 10-8 in the fight in the 5th round. So 5 rounds, you got a pretty good win. And in our co-main event, one of the most boy fighters of all time. Shout out to OSW. But Francisco Trinaldo, that's one of the most boy guys ever, I think. And he's fighting, ironically named enough, Rude Boy Randy Brown. It's actually not a bad fight. I was like, okay, this fight's either going to be really slow or really awesome. It's kind of in the middle, I thought. I didn't love it, personally. But a little patient in the first round. But Brown did land a really big shot, and he threatened with the guillotine at the end. So, of course, I lean towards him. I think that's, it was fairly even, but those are the big moments. So I'm going to lean towards Brown. Second round, really close. Ronaldo is throwing a ton of shots, but I don't think they're landing. I think even the numbers suggested they weren't landing, or they weren't being counted as lands. So it was really close. I personally don't. I love output. I think output's important. But if you're not effectively if your output isn't effective, that's the wording I want. If your output isn't effective, then I don't. It's kind of hard for me to care. As a-holy as that sounds, I suppose. So I do score that round for Brown. Third round, though, that's a clear Ronaldo round because he ended the fight on top, and he even landed. I think he dropped him with a low kick, and that's how he was able to stay on top. And I think he got a takedown near the end as well, if I remember correctly. But it's a really close fight, and it was another one of these fights where I've seen people argue on Twitter about this, and I once again go, you know what? I totally understand both things. Very few times does that happen where, like, I feel like I'm usually a very opinionated man in terms of, like, Twitter decisions where it's like, how in the world did Izzy beat Whitaker too? Real opinion of mine. Like, what reality was that? An Izzy one, I think. I feel pretty strongly about that. But this one, 2 fights in a row where I'm like, I get it, man. I totally get it. And, there's the rest of the card I'm going to just kind of, go down because there's 2 things I want to really talk about. Super Sadiq Youssef, one of my guys, he's not a boy. I think he's too highly ranked and too highly touted to be considered a boy. But I'm really high on the guy. He won in 30 seconds with a guillotine. I say guillotine. I'm not boss rooting all of a sudden. A guillotine after forcing a takedown with these nasty tie clinch knees. And that dude is still a big prospect. His only loss in the UFC is to Arnold Allen, who we know is huge. He's like, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna is Arnold Allen gonna fight like Josh Emmett? Maybe Calvin Kattar? Like, what's going on? Like, we're all kind of doing that with like Arnold Allen's next opponent. So with that being Super Sadiq Youssef's only loss, and a lot of highly respected MMA writers are going, hey, this is one of the guys. This might be one of the guys right here. He's very talented. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And he did call out Korean Zombie after the win, which is sure. I want Korean Zombie to retire though. That's just me. Daniel Santos came out looking like this odd love child of Robbie Lawler and Charlie Olives to us. But he actually, after losing the first round, he rallied. It was a wild first round, by the way. He rallied and got a KO win over John Castaneda. Really fun, like less than 2 round fight. I really dug this fight. I was like, man, it's pretty good. And lastly, Guido Canetti tapped out Randy Costa, another fighter who I think is a super boy material. In the first round, though, it was really quick. I think it was like barely over a minute. Guido Canetti tapped out Costa. And that's probably the end to the Randy Costa run in the UFC, which for the time being, I will say, because obviously you can come back. See the guys like Dustin Jacoby come back. And I actually really like Randy Costa's style. He went 2-4 in the UFC, but his fight with Adrian Yanez is a banger. Like, that fight's really good. It shows, I think, how good both guys potentially are. Like, Yanez struggled with the really long strikes and the kicks because it was taking away head movement. It was forcing, okay, well, now I've just got to parry. I can't really use my head movement against these long straights. It was a really interesting fight, a very technical fight. I really enjoyed that fight. I could talk about it for a long time. That fight's great, and that's kind of what got me on the Randy Costa, like, this guy's awesome train, but potentially the end. And the final 2 things I want to touch on is Mark Zuckerberg like a big Mackenzie Dern fan or something? I mean, I get it, dude, but that was the worst kept secret, and I legitimately think we just caught Dana lying when Dern's like, yeah, Zuckerberg, I guess, rented the place out, bought all the tickets. And Dana's like, BS. No, absolutely, you goof. He was. I imagine he got like incredibly red. Maybe orange. He probably got a little orange. Hulk Hogan it. But that being said, it is a private owned venue. first and foremost. So maybe the UFC invited him for a potential business meeting over the UFC Meta partnership. Ooh. And evil face there. You know, that's how I imagine how most billionaire businesses talk to each other. I imagine they do that face. And they just cleared the place out for him. No media. Tough luck. Just cameras and Mark Zuckerberg being really awkward. It was really funny. I felt like every time he showed up on camera, the UFC would be like, cut away the camera. Don't show him. And they would like change angles really fast. It was really weird. And secondly, I had to pay respects to the man Antonio Inoki. And for those who don't know, Inoki was this massive superstar in professional wrestling in Japan. And he was but one reason why I wanted to bring him up, not just for that, is he was an innovator of mixed martial arts in a sense, as he was a lifelong fan of the martial arts, and he is credited with being potentially in the first ever, I don't think it's the first ever, but it's probably the first major widely known mixed rules match against Muhammad Ali of all people. And it's a wild fight. Both dudes go to the hospital afterwards. There's a lot of crazy things going in before the fight and after the fight. And I could talk about it for a while, but I don't want to ramble any more than I already have. I'm sure there's a documentary on it somewhere. If not, there's a thing called Google. It's fantastic. Or maybe if you guys want, I'll throw it up. I'll do an entire video over it all, and we'll put it on Patreon. It'll just be me rambling because New Japan's copyright is terrible, I hear. But Inoki is like considered one of the grandfathers of mixed martial arts. Him and Judo Jean LaBelle are, in my opinions, the two guys who kind of figured it out before almost anybody else. I know people say Bruce Lee as well. Bruce Lee was training multiple martial arts, but he never was too interested in mixed rules match from what I remember. But rest in peace to both of them, actually. Judo Jean LaBelle has passed away as well. Rest in peace, you legend. For real, Antonio Inoki. But that's it for me. No fights next week either? Man, you guys are going to be missing me like crazy. But don't worry, I got the medicine. There's a retro review for UFC 280 being worked on in the editing process right now. And for UFC 281, I have that. We're coming in on my end. I'm working on that right now. But I also have something else cooking up on my end. Something I've talked with Carl, and I've also talked with Gage, who is the editor for the retro reviews currently. And I think it's going to be something pretty cool. It's something that other channels do, and I think we need a mixed martial arts version of this. So I've been working on it. Hopefully I can get it going soon. But that's all I'm going to say for now. But be sure to check me out right here after the UFC Grosso versus Vivian Arroyo. And I'm Joe with the INC. Thank you for watching.